raise a hallelujah in the presence of my enemies. I'll raise a hallelujah louder than the unbelief. I'll raise a hallelujah. My weapon is a melody. I'll raise a hallelujah. Heaven comes to fight for me. I'm gonna sing in the middle of the storm. Louder and louder, you're gonna hear my praises roar.
everybody. I see the sun out today. I'm so excited for this warm weather. Who else is excited? I know summer's coming. It's time for those lake days.
I'm gonna burn for
invite you now to join with me as we continue our worship with the receiving of our tithes and offerings this morning. And what a joy it is to be in a position where we're able to give back to God what He so generously gives to us, and how we get to honor Him with our hearts, our resources, all encompassing with our lives as we worship. So would you pray with me this morning as we receive this together today? God, I thank you so much for who you are. I thank you that you give to us and that we have the joy of giving back to you. God, I pray that you multiply this, you take this, you receive it with an open heart as we openly and freely give back to you what you give to us, God. And then as we pray consistently in each week, God, that you take this, you take it far beyond these walls, and you multiply it in ways that only you can, so that your love is seen, your joy is felt, the lost are reached, God, and you make a movement in this city like we've never seen before. We thank you, we love you, and everybody said, amen.
Come out of sadness from wherever you've been. Come broken-hearted, let the rescue begin. Come find your mercy, oh sinner, come kneel. Earth has no sorrow that heaven can't heal. Earth has no sorrow that heaven can't heal. So lay down your burdens, lay down your shame. All who are broken, lift up your face. Oh, wanderer, come home. You're not too far. So lay down your burden, lay down your mind, come as you are.
Good morning, church. Would you bow your heads with me? Dear Lord, as we begin this Sunday morning, I ask that you fill us with your mercy and help us apply this sermon to our lives. And I pray that you lift any burdens that we may have today. Amen. Well, good morning, church. How is everybody? Thank you. Thank you for saying good morning. My name is Aurora, if we haven't met before, and this is Hannah, one of my closest friends. And we just have a couple announcements for you. And obviously, as every Sunday, our first announcement is Connect Cards. Connect Cards are in the seat in front of you, and sorry, it's just an amazing way for Pastor Dustin to get to know you if you're new, and even if you're not new, if you just have any prayer requests, you can just write it down. Or my personal favorite is write a joke, or even give him some fashion sense notes, because he desperately needs that. And once you're done filling that out, you can just pop it in the tithe box over there.
We have worship night coming up here at 6:30 to around 8 on Friday, March 14th. It's a great way to connect with your church community, and there's going to be a couple other churches coming, and it's a great way to connect with them. And it's going to be led by my dad, Josh, and the youth is going to do a couple of songs. So if you like what you heard today, then come check it out.
And our very next announcement is youth group, one of my favorite announcements. Youth group is on Thursdays from 6:30 to 8. You can come as early as 6 to hang out beforehand and meet new people. And it's just an amazing way to connect with your fellow youth. And we play games in the beginning of the night, and we do what's called our talkie bits, led by Alan. He's sitting right there. Yeah, he's kind of weird, but it's okay. And then we end out the night with more games, and then it ends at 8, but we typically stay till 8:10 or 8:15, just chilling and hanging out.
We have also spring coming up, so that means spring cleaning. And it's after church on March 30th, I think is what Stephanie said. And lunch is provided. That's definitely the deal breaker for me. It's an amazing way to serve the church and just start fresh and, and clean. And please RSVP at ccpwallop.com.
So we have enough food. Yeah. Our next announcement is Easter. Well, our last announcement is Easter. Easter is coming up on April 20th. I'm really excited. It's one of my favorite services. And invite your friends, invite your family, invite that weird cousin that you haven't talked to in a long time. It's just an amazing way for us to connect with God on this big Sunday. And there will be 2 services, one at 9 a.m. and one at 11. And there will be childcare, and there's a big Easter hunt for the kids. And I'm pretty sure there's going to be an Easter bunny running around. Right? For kids to chase? Yeah. There will be an Easter bunny running around for the kids to chase, and he'll carry eggs, and yes, it's just an amazing way. And with that, I'll like to pass it to Pastor Dustin.
Good morning, everybody. So clarify on the Easter bunny running around for kids to chase. We typically have a couple Easter bunnies. One of them will be stationary, and do not tackle him. He'll be there for pictures, but if you tackle him, there may be a lawsuit and medical bills that follow that. Easter's going to be lots of fun. Egg hunt, food, invite your friends and family, and it's Easter Sunday is just, we refer to it at church often as our Super Bowl Sunday. We're expecting a lot of people to come and check out the service and worship with us. It's going to be a great time. And yeah, 9 and 11 on Easter Sunday. So if you come at 10, you'll be just in time to get ready, help set up for the next service, and it'll be great. But would love to have you join us. And if I could also just, as a pastor, ask this of the church. If you're not serving anywhere yet, dive in on Easter Sunday. I would challenge everybody, let's make the whole morning out of that. Attend one service and serve at another. So come at 9 and then serve at the 11, or serve at the 9 and then attend 11. But that way you get to come, you get to be here, help facilitate, have fun with people, welcome our community, and whatever team you'd like to be a part of, there's spots almost in any ministry we would love to have you and use your help. And then for the next service, attend, worship, and be a part of the celebration. It's going to be a great day, and I can't wait to see what God's going to do here in our hearts and all of the hearts of the people that join us that morning. Turn your Bibles to Luke chapter 15. We're going to continue on with this series. We've been talking about the lost coin, the lost sheep, the heart of God, and we've been calling this created. Why were we created? What is our worth? What is our significance? Why does God invest into us? And today, we're going to dive into God's perspective of us a little bit. Now, do we have any John Denver fans in the house? 2 of you. All right, sweet. Okay, so this story is going to really hit home. There's an old song by John Denver. All songs by him are old. There's a song by John Denver. It's called Gospel Changes. Is anyone familiar with this song? It's called Gospel Changes. Some people actually call the song The Prodigal Son by John Denver, but it's called Gospel Changes. And the lyrics of the song are about the prodigal son in Scripture. It talks about Christ, but the chorus in the song, it says this: I listened to what the good book said, and it made good sense to me. Talking about reaping, what you're sowing, and people trying to be free. Now we've got new names and faces. This time around, gospel changes, Lord, still going down. Now, I'm not sure of John Denver's faith journey at all. But this song is a really, really good song. And there's some good lines in this song that talk about a walk with Christ and how things that happened in Scripture, if we look close enough, we can see God moving in hearts today. It's a really cool message that he says in this song. And there's clearly inspiration from the book of Luke here. I mean, the song very much quotes a lot of the story of the prodigal son and how much Jesus relates to us today, in not just in Scripture, but in our lives today. Now, when you come across the New Testament, many of us can think about the prodigal son. You can think, I know the story. I mean, just show of hands, if you hear the phrase prodigal son, how many of you know in a nutshell the story? Most of us do, right? Most of us know. I know not everybody does, but most of us, if you've been in church for a while, and especially in children's ministry, you grew up going to church, this is a very popular story. This is a very common one. People that sometimes even don't go to church or have any history with the church, they know this story because it's just one that pop culture has used before. But if you wonder what the word prodigal son means, because we call it the prodigal son, if you read the story, what comes to mind when you hear the word prodigal? Not just son, get out of here. Don't get out of here, stay there. But when you hear the word prodigal, typically you think lost. You think of the son who ran away, right? Someone who has wandered off, maybe someone who's gonna come back, the returning home aspect of it. one who's wandered off and all that. But if you look up the word prodigal, you know what the definition of prodigal actually is? According to the American Heritage Dictionary, prodigal is actually defined as this: recklessly wasteful and extravagant. Now it makes sense, right? When you say the prodigal son, if you know the story and what he does, and we're going to read it, you see what he does. He is recklessly wasteful. He is extravagant. And then he ultimately does come home. But the story of the prodigal son is not just about the son that was lost. That's a huge part of it. But the more I look into this story, I started looking at different characters and people that Jesus is talking about as he tells the story, looking at them individually, and I'm convinced this story has a lot more to do about the father than it does the son. Now, the story is about a son being wasteful. He goes to his dad. He convinces his dad to give him his inheritance early, and he squanders it before coming home. But I don't think that's the point of the story. The story is not just about a son. It has a big deal, major things about the father. Now, when the story begins in Luke 15:11, the first line says, there was a man who had two sons. So for all of you English majors in here, what is the subject of the sentence? The man. And then what is the object of the sentence? His sons, right? We have the man who has two sons. So the story is almost about this father who, when we see with that definition, reckless and extravagant, we can say there's some prodigal aspects to this father as well. And it's really cool how this plays out. It's a father who can be extravagant and reckless in how he comes to his kids. And I think to fully appreciate it, we got to see this. We're going to read the story in its entirety, and we're going to put different verses up on the screens because we're really going to dive into some cultural history here about the story and why this means so much. Jesus was very intentional, as we talked about last week with the lost sheep. And as we talked about with the lost coin, why did he use those examples? Why did he use those people? They were impactful. So when he tells this story about the prodigal son and the father's reaction, we're going to see some things that would literally blow the Pharisees' minds that they would not understand, and they would freak out. Why would anyone do this? But Jesus tells this story in an incredible way. In my mind, this has become one of the most important and impactful stories in my life because it gives such an incredible view of what God does for us, how he loves us, and how significant we are to him. If you ever question, how does God feel about you? If you ever question, what is your worth? Why do I matter? How do I know I matter? This is the story. This is an incredible story. This story will answer the question, how does God feel about you? How does God feel about you? So, this is a story Jesus tells. This is the third story in this group of parables that he shares in response to some of the Pharisees when they saw Jesus hanging out with the riffraff of Israel. Remember, they invited Jesus to this party. Jesus is hanging out with people that they don't think he should be hanging out with. They're ignoring the sick person. They're trying to catch Jesus healing people when he shouldn't be healing people. And Jesus is using this big analogy of these parties. And then he comes down to these stories. He starts with the 100. Then he says there's 10. And now he comes down to 2. So the whispering and this muttering doesn't sit well with Jesus. These Pharisees are gossiping basically about him. So he tells them about these stories. And now we come to Luke chapter 15, starting in verse 11. We're going to read this through together. It says this: Jesus continued, there was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to the father, "Father, give me my share of the estate." So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country who sent him to the fields to feed the pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. When he came to his senses, he said, "How many of my father's hired servants have food to spare? And here I am starving to death. I will set out and go back to my father, and I'll say to him, 'Father, I've sinned against heaven and you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants.' He got up and went to his father. While he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. The son said to the father, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate, for this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and he is found. So they began to celebrate. Meanwhile, the older son was in the field. When he came near the house, he heard the music and dancing. So he called one of the servants and asked him, what's going on? Your brother has come, he replied, and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound. The older brother became angry and refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him, but he answered his father, look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who has squandered your property with prostitutes, comes home, you killed the fattened calf for him. My son, the father said, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. Now, if that was the first time you heard the story, there's a lot we're going to unpack. If that's the 1,000,000th time you've heard the story, we're going to unpack the same amount of stuff. But there is so much in here culturally that I think if you've never done a deep dive into the things the father does in this story, it's incredible how many things he does that are reckless, humiliating, and so egregious that people would not approve of the father doing these things. Now, for years growing up, and even when I was a children's pastor, when I taught this story to kids, the focus is the son. That's 90% of the time we focus on the son and what did he do? Why did he go? What did he really ask of his dad? The way he wished his father was dead so he could have his inheritance. How he had to change himself. He had to have that heart moment where he said, the servants have it better than this. I've got to go home humbly and ask to work for my dad. And we talk about that, and I'm not negating any of that of the story. That is a powerful part of the story. And I think there are so many times in our lives where we relate to the son. Right? We relate to that. I've been so far away. I'm so down on my luck, and I've messed up really bad, and I've got to come home and just I got to come to God and say, here's what I've done. God, I'm sorry. We can hit the lowest of lows, and we find new life in Christ. I'm not negating that part of the story. That is powerful and impactful, and we can relate to that. Sometimes we talk about the older brother at the end of the story. How many times are we bitter that somebody else is getting celebrated and we're not? We're not the focus when we've been doing things right all along and things seem to be going right for other people, and we can have that older brother mentality. Bye, Aurora. But we can have that moment where we recognize that our pride is getting in the way. Where our pride is the thing that's just messing with us, and we have to get to that point of humility and recognize that God is celebrating something worth celebrating. The older brother is a very relatable character in the story for us. Thinking of that, however, my view of God personally was so elevated when I just did a deep dive into the Father. When I decided I'm gonna look at everything the Father does with a fine-tooth comb and see why is this so relatable to God. And when you see that the Father, not just the Son, is the star of this story, I think it can rock your world on how God views you. It's almost like saying the story of the prodigal father. And there's a number of scenes we're going to break down here. Now I feel bad for embarrassing you. Thank you. Scene 1. It's set on the family homestead. Right? Scene 1 is about the father dividing his property between his sons. Then you have scene 2, which is what happens to the younger son who runs to a faraway land, squanders everything, and has to escape the scorn of the village, right? Scene 3 describes the interaction between the father and the younger son when the son comes home. Scene 4 picks up with the older son in the field. And scene 5 is about the older son and us kind of wondering what is his response, because Jesus doesn't really close that end of it. To understand that, you have to understand a whole bunch of Jewish culture, and that's what we're going to dive into a lot today about this story. Now, for the next chunk of time, pretend you don't know anything about Jewish culture. And if you don't already, great, no pretending. But we're going to dive in. Why is this so crazy? So in scene number 1 now, we have the younger son, right? He comes to the dad, says, Dad, I want my inheritance. This is a part of the story that a lot of us may know. as far as why it's important. Because at first glance, the dad says, all right, I'll give you everything. And you can think, what a great dad. The son's ready to fly off on his own and do things. But culturally, if you understand what happens, you would understand that the son just walked to his dad and said, I wish you were dead. That's a big thing to say to your dad. I wish you were dead. No son would make this request of their father, because to ask for their inheritance would be to express that you did not want to be part of the family. You wanted them dead and you wanted them out of your life. Now, author Ken Bailey, who actually lived in that region of the world for quite some time, he wrote this. For over 15 years, I have been asking people of all walks of life, from Morocco to India and from Turkey to the Sudan, about the implications of the son's request for inheritance while the father is still alive. The answer has almost always been emphatically the same. The conversation runs as follows. Has anyone ever made such a request in your village? Never. Could anyone make such a request? Impossible. If anyone did, what would happen? His father would beat him, of course. Why? This means he would want his father to die. One Middle Eastern writer, Ibrahim Said, writes, the shepherd in the search for sheep and the woman in the search for the coin do not do anything out of the ordinary beyond anyone in their place would do. But the actions of the father in the third story are unique, marvelous, and divine, which would not have been done by any father in the past. Divide your inheritance so that I can have my share of the state is the request. Now, to everyone's amazement, the father does. So just that right there, when Jesus is telling the story and says the son asks for the inheritance and the father does, right there the Pharisees are already like, why would anyone do this? Who does that? Do you even realize, Jesus, what you just told us happened right then and there, just 2 sentences into the story, and he's already rocking their cultural, their rules. Now the next words say this, not long after that, the younger son got all he had, set off for a distant country, and squandered it on wealth and living. Now, a lot of us will think that timeline-wise, because it's just a couple sentences, the son asks for the money, dad says it's yours, son leaves. It doesn't happen that fast. If you have an estate, that does not mean that the father just had, let me go open up the safe and give you all my money. If he wanted to get his portion of the estate, what would the father have to do? He's got to sell stuff. He's got to sell off the portion that would go to his son and then give it to him. So the line actually says, not long after that, which means if you're really listening to the story, there's some time now. Dad now has to work and sell stuff knowing his son wishes him dead. He doesn't beat him. He doesn't kick him out. He says, okay, and starts working for that. He starts selling. Now, he had to liquidate his son's portion of the inheritance. He had to find a buyer for that portion of the farm, of that portion of the family, the jewels and the livestock and all the things that were going to go to his son. He had to sell it off. And culturally, who do you start selling to? The people in the village, the people that are around. So as Jesus is telling the story, his listeners are imagining this brash young man going from door to door, trying to convince people who knew his father, hey, I'm selling this and I'm taking it and leaving. What is that now doing culturally for his friends and family and people in the neighborhood? It is diminishing his status and embarrassing his father. This is what the son is doing. These folks now are getting the impression, and they now know, son is insulting dad. They're shaming dad. He's wishing his dad is dead. Now he's selling off property and possessions that have been in the family for who knows how many generations. This son is embarrassing his family in just one of the biggest ways possible. He's probably greeted with amazement, horror, sometimes rejection. A family's estate in general is a big part of Middle Eastern culture. Now, as the scorn mounts, he feels more and more pressured, right, to get out of town. This is just probably fueling for him. I've got to get out of here. I don't belong here. We got to sell this. I got to get this money. I've got to go. So then he leaves. Can you imagine how the village feels about him now? Everybody knows what he's done. Everybody's all up in his business. Some of them own his family stuff now. And then he leaves. He is probably the talk of the town, not in a good way. There had been talk about shunning, publicly shaming, and some actions put in case he were ever to dare show his face again. As soon as the transactions are done, he heads to a faraway country, and that's where we have the next scene, right? The faraway country, he gradually descends into his own personal hell. Loses, squanders everything. He's probably feeling really good at first and living it up, and then it gets bad. It says he squandered his wealth in wild living. He wasted it. You know what happens around in that culture when someone does something like that? Word gets out. You know who probably knows everything that's happening right now? His dad, his family, the village. This is not new news. They know what is happening because word spreads, especially when someone with that much money just starts going out and going crazy. People know. They're probably unimpressed with this frivolous young man who is now out of money. And the polite way that Middle Eastern people in this culture would get rid of hangers-on, as they called it, isn't to come right out and tell them to go home. It's to assign them a task that they'll refuse. When someone who squanders things says, I need help, they say, we're going to give you the lowest of low jobs because that's all you are now, that's all you're worth, and you don't even deserve this. So when he asks for a job, what do they offer him? Feeding the pigs. What animals in that culture are unclean and taboo? The pigs. It's a job no self-respecting Jewish boy would ever accept. But that's how low he is. He takes it. They were unclean according to the law of Moses. They had to be fed 7 days a week, which means what could you not keep in that culture if you had to work 7 days a week? You couldn't keep the Sabbath. He is now abandoning his own heritage and culture and religious beliefs because he has got so low. But to everyone's surprise, he takes the job. It's a terrible job. It doesn't even pay well enough for him to eat. He has to eat with the pigs. This is a hole of self-pity. And he starts thinking honestly about himself now, right? So he is at the lowest of lows. No one around him is this low. He knows there's no life for him, but he can't go home to his dad because he's a failure. He's got nothing to offer his father. Middle Eastern sons in this time, what are they supposed to do when their father gets old? They're supposed to care for their dad. They're not supposed to go home and have their dad care for them in his old age. It's vice versa. Their dad passes off inheritance. They care for him until he passes on. He can't even do that now. So he has to, if I go home, I have to live off of my dad instead of getting to a place where my dad can now live off of me because I'm caring for my family. So he begins to think creatively. Can't go back home. He can't ask to live in the family house as a son. But just maybe, he can go back and he can be a servant. That way, if he works hard and saves money, something he is not good at, as we've learned, maybe someday he'll be able to use some of it to help out his family again. So he has this plan. Go home, admit he was a fool. Instead of being asked to be reinstated as a son, he'll just be a servant. He'll just be a hired hand at home. The plan has merit, except for one thing. Even if the father says yes, there's another group of people waiting to scorn him. There's another group of people that do not ever want to see him again because they know the shame he brought on his dad. And by doing that, the shame that his face will bring to their town. He's got to face the village. He's got to face the people. If anyone has ever moved from one foreign country to here or to another, as you know, it's difficult to go home. If you've ever left home, what's something that some people have a hard time facing is if I leave home and I'm not successful, I have a really hard time going back home. I have a really hard time saying, Mom, Dad, this is what I've done with my life, right? If you go do something and it just crashes and burns, it takes a lot of humility to go back home. This is not just something we know. This is a worldwide thing with people leaving the house, right? He has not just left the house and said, oh, I messed up, Mom, Dad, I need help. It was, Dad, I wish you were dead, give me your money. Now he's got to go back and say, I blew it. It's even more embarrassing than just someone who tried and didn't quite succeed on their own. The villagers, they hate him. His family, he thinks they hate him. He disgraced everyone by wishing his father was dead and then disposing of the family's property. Adding all of this, he's despised by the Gentiles. He lived his prodigal life. He has no solution except be a servant. He just has to endure the mocking, scorn, and shame. And another thing about Middle Eastern culture, that's endure the mocking and shame if he even makes it home. They would have had every right to grab him, throw him out, not let him reach home, and if he tried again, stone him and kill him. That's how embarrassing he was. That's what he was prepping himself to go do. He had to go through the gauntlet to even get home. Now we're at scene 3. He starts to go home. And this is where the story of the father comes in full force. And I get emotional when I think about what the father does here. The father, because of this experience, he knows these things. First, he knows that his son, given the maturity level and character of which he is, because we know our kids. Your parents know you guys. We know a kid's maturity level. We know when we're like, all right, you're ready to go, or there's some things you got to learn. That's why we say things. Pay attention. The father knows his son is going to fail. He knows this is not going to work out. He knows that if the son ever does come home, he's not going to walk up and say, Dad, look what I did with all the inheritance. Aren't you glad you did that for me? Dad knows this is not what's going to happen. But he's waiting. He's waiting for his son. Second thing the father's going to know, he knows that the village will not treat him well. He knows the culture. He knows what his son went through when he left. He knows what's going to happen when he comes back. And reportedly, he also knows that he probably should not have given his son his inheritance. He should have said, no, you're grounded. Go to your room. But he didn't do it. He knows his son was going to squander everything, and his son deserves nothing short of death, and he deserves that gauntlet coming home. He knows that if his son ever does return, the first person who sees him will quickly pass word that this fool came home, and he dares show his face back in the village, and they are going to gather people to mock, spit, beat, hurt, maybe even kill. He knows that in order to get home, his son has to endure that, and maybe he'll make it to see his son again. Father knows all of this. And what he does to counteract is nothing short of amazing. In scene 3, we see the father do 5 things that no father in that culture would ever or should ever do. It would be outrageous in Middle Eastern society. They're all designed to protect and restore his son that he loves so much. The son that has turned away from him, the son that rejected him, we see him do these things. And as you think of these things, think of God coming to you. The first thing we see the father does is he runs. The father runs. That line right there shook the Pharisees, I guarantee it. When the word came that his son has come to seen on the outskirts of the village, the father runs to him. You know why this is so significant? Instead of letting his son run the gauntlet, he ran the gauntlet to his son. Instead of letting the son run the gauntlet, he ran the gauntlet to his son. This is outrageous because a nobleman with flowing robes and rings and sandals, of course, if you try to run in sandals, you're not going to get very far, but he does it. He does it. And also with the robes, in Middle Eastern culture, the ankle is something you don't expose. So for him to run with what he was wearing and the robe and clothes he had, he was exposing his ankles to the village as he's running to his son. That was a cultural faux pas. That is humiliating. And he did it. One ancient Jewish writer said this about running. He said, a man's manner of walking tells you what he is. That's Ben Sirach. Another scholar, Leslie Weatherhead, said this: it is so very undignified in Eastern eyes for an elderly man to run. And Aristotle, the Greek philosopher, said, great men never run in public. Taking all these cultural things that we have of what men should or shouldn't do, what does the father in this story do? He runs to his son. He breaks every cultural rule to let the son know just how much he means to him, how much he wants him. And Jesus explains why. He says, but while he was still a long ways off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He was so filled with compassion for his son that he was willing to humiliate himself to get there. That's how God feels about you. He has so much compassion for you. He will run deliberately through the village. He will run deliberately, not caring if it's humiliating, to get to you. He knows he's creating a spectacle. He knows what he's doing will have people going, what is happening right now? Who does that? But he doesn't care. He goes anyway. He knows they'll talk about his humiliation for the rest of his life. It doesn't matter. Now imagine this from the son's perspective. He knows his father where he lives. He knows he's going to have to go through the gauntlet. He knows his town hates him. He knows there's no way he can get to his dad without enduring scorn. But he has to get to his father in order to become his servant. So he sets his jaw. He gets that final determination, like he knows what he has to do. He builds up the courage, and he starts walking to town. And sure enough, at the first sighting on the outskirts, the village, the word starts spreading. Here he comes, here he comes. But then it shifts to, whoa, here he comes. And you see the dad running. He expects to see the rocks, the jeers, the angry faces, but instead what he sees coming towards him are the ankles of his father. His father humiliating himself to get to him. And to his utter amazement, rather than experiencing this ruthless hostility, I mean, instead of his dad running to him and his dad being the one to just clock him and say, what are you doing here? He finds a visible demonstration of the love of his father, and words can't express what this scene conveys. You can only imagine this playing out. The father runs to his son. And then we see the second thing that his father does. He kisses him. He kisses his son. The text in Luke 15:20 says, he ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. Can you picture that? They're embracing eye to eye, shoulder to shoulder, grappled around him. In his mind, his son, he'd pictured himself coming home and abasing himself. First, he'd kiss his father's hand. Then he'd kiss his father's feet. Then he'd go into what he said, right? I'm going to be a servant. I don't even deserve to be called your son. But the father doesn't even let him get there. Before he can say anything, he grabs him. He kisses him. He doesn't let him get on his feet or on his knees and start kissing his feet. He doesn't even give him the opportunity. The son can't bend, he can't stoop. All he can do is receive the love that his father is giving him. And the Greek word used here is kataphilou, which really means to kiss and kiss again and again. Picture yourself in this. You've wronged God and you know it. You've come to that moment, right, where you say, I've got to go humbly to God. I've got to humiliate myself, admit where I'm wrong. I need to grovel. God, I made all sorts of promises that I didn't keep, and I'm going to make new ones that I really want to keep, and I am at the lowest of lows, God. But as you approach him, you've got your whole speech planned, but he doesn't even let you begin. The moment you get there, the moment you approach him, he embraces you and just says, you're home, and kisses you. That is powerful. Now back up for a minute to see what the son planned to do. We see that the son planned his whole speech, right? Luke 15:19, it says this, I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, Father, I've sinned against heaven and you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of our hired men. So you see the plan here? Admit guilt, ask to become a servant. He's got this. Now look at the actual speech that happens. Luke 15:21. Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. What's missing from that speech? The part about becoming the servant. That part of the speech is gone. Why is that not there anymore? Why is it not there? It takes a shift, I think, because now we see someone who is so overwhelmed by his father's love that things start to shift inside of him. His plan was to earn his way back into his father's favor. He never intended to ask his father to accept him back as he was. I mean, how could he do that with everything he had done, everything he had wasted, right? But when the father runs and kisses him, all he can do is get overwhelmed and accept his father's love. The servant part's out of the equation now. It's just being in the arms of his father. Then we see his father do something else. He clothes him. His exact words are here. It says, quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Bring the best robe and put it on him. All right, so pop quiz. In that family, who owns the best robe? The father. In our house, it's my wife. But in that culture, it's the dad. He has the best robe. He's got the goods. He says, bring the best robe and put him on him. Put it on him. The father and son are still standing on the edge of the village, and the father wants the whole village now to see exactly what he's doing for his son. He doesn't bring his son all the way back and say, now we'll get things right. He comes to where he is and says, we're going to do it right here, right now. And he brings the son the robe. He wants everyone to see that he has accepted him. He sends servants to get his own best robe so the son can wear it and then walk back through the village to get home wearing that instead. That's an amazing sight to see God saying, we're not going to wait till everything's all, I'm not going to bring you here and then work on you. I will work on you right as you are. The fourth thing is he does this. He calls for a ring. What he's doing here is he is elevating his son in front of everybody. See, the ring that he would bring him, it says, put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. The ring is probably a signet ring, the ring that he would use as his status, so people would know exactly where he is in the hierarchy of the village. Something maybe he would use when he signed all documents. So him putting this on his son means he is back in my family. He is here. He is in good graces. He is trusted. He is empowered. He is mine. It was the sandals that he gave him were a sign that he was a free man. He was not a servant. Servants didn't get shoes. They walked barefoot. He gave his son incredible status in front of everyone, said, you are significant, and I love you, and you are mine. And then fifth, he celebrates him. Jesus brings it back to the party. A few weeks ago when we started, it was all about this invitation to a party. And what does Jesus do at the end of every one of these stories? It's all about this party again. He brings it back. He says in Luke 15:23, bring the fattened calf, kill it. Not the fattened goat, not the fattened sheep, not the biggest chickens. Why the calf? Because the calf had enough meat on it to feed everyone. He said, we are going to celebrate with everyone what's happening. So you see what he's doing here? He's not just making this a private thing. He's inviting the whole village now to celebrate this joy with him. His son's not only reconciled to him, his son is reconciled to the whole village. He wants everyone to have this relationship with his son now. It's not just, yeah, we're going to work through it and eventually it'll get to you. It's right away he's saying he's back. We are going to celebrate. Everybody needs to know he's good. He is fine and he's welcome. This is a story nobody could have anticipated. You see how many cultural things happened in just that short story of him running to his son? One commenter writes this. He says, for Palestinian listeners, initially the father would naturally be a symbol of God. Then, as the story progresses, the father comes out of his house and in a dramatic act demonstrates unexpected love publicly in humiliation. You see, it's a rags to unbelievable riches story. And the riches aren't all about the money. I think what we see here is we see your worth. We see our worth in God's eyes. We see our worth in God's eyes. You see what Jesus is doing here? He's communicating to every person who ever wanted to take a step towards God just how significant we are to him. No matter how far you've gone, you can be right there. And as soon as you say, I'm coming back, he's already running to you. He is already there. He doesn't just wait for you, he runs to you. He doesn't let you bear the shame of your lives as if you wished you were dead. He bears it for you. He runs the gauntlet. And when he gets to you, he kisses you. And when he kisses you, then he puts his robe on you and he puts his ring on you. He kills the fattened calf to celebrate you and then he invites everybody to celebrate with him. That's how God views us. That's our worth to him. We are worth the humiliation that Christ suffered on the cross. We're worth it. We are worth him elevating us. We are worth him running the gauntlet. We are worth him kissing us. We are worth him elevating us by clothing us. We are worth the celebration. And we need to know that no matter how far you feel, nothing can stop him from doing that for you. Absolutely nothing. Let him run to you. Let him kiss you. Let him robe you. Let him elevate you. Let him celebrate you. I wish we had time to unpack everything he does with the older brother. But we're going to talk a little bit about the older brother's reaction here because the father does something else humiliating with the older brother for in his status there. Now, this could come as, again, a part of the story that a lot of people don't understand or even see as a big deal. But the father does something when he goes to the older son that, again, is humiliating. So the older son now, right? He hasn't left home. And as you read the story, you'll discover that he actually here has done his own leaving of the father. What did he not want to attend? He didn't want to go to the party. Where is dad? Where is the village? Where is everyone that dad just humiliated himself in front of? They are at this party, and the older son is like, I'm not going. So now we have the older son doing his own leaving. The older son is now exiling himself. Now, there are just two mentions of the older son. The opening of the story, when it says this man who had two sons, and then he said, let me give my fair share of the estate. So he divided his property between them. Now, in the first sentence, he's mentioned as one of the two sons. In the second, he's actually mentioned as receiving some of the estate. It says he divided his property between them. So the older son is actually affected by this whole squandering of the wealth of the younger son because he's now getting some of the inheritance up front as well. The older son owns everything that he and his father now live on. It already belongs to him. He's there and stuff has been sold and he is now part of this ownership group. The older son is coming in from the fields. He hears the music. He's getting the report that from one of the servants that his brothers returned home safely. He's been robed. He's been clothed. Dad humiliated himself, and now there's a party. And what's the older brother's response? He's ticked off. He is now ticked off. He becomes angry. He refuses to join because of everything, right? I mean, I think it's easy to identify with the older brother in that part. Like, why is this happening? That person does not deserve it. I think we've all been there at some point. And now he is there. He becomes angry. This would have been a severe insult to his father, humiliating his dad for a second time in front of everybody. The rumors probably could have started again. Your older son's not even coming? Wow, can you get a grip on your household, man? With him not at the party, everybody knows now that now the older son is rejecting dad. If you read further, you'll find in his heart that the older son is distanced from his father just about as much as the younger son did. He says to his father in Luke 15:29, "Look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends." Those two statements tip us off to how distant he is from his dad now. First off, does he say, "Look, I'm your son"? No, he doesn't say that. He says, "Look, I've been slaving away for you and never disobeyed." Right there, you know what he's telling his dad? I don't even really know if I'm your son anymore. I'm just a servant. I'm a slave in your house. It's like he slapped his dad in the face. He's been slaving away for his father. He hasn't been living like a son, but he's been living like a servant. The very thing the younger son decided was the best he could do after he shamed his father is what the older son is now living. Second, he's mad because he said his dad never threw him a party. He said, you never invited me. You never killed the fattened calf for me. What's the deal, Dad? Or as my kids say, what the heck, man? That's where they're at now. Notice that in his mind, his friends are not the father's friends. He doesn't want to party with his dad or be friends with his friends. He's developed his own relational web, and his father now has nothing to do with it. It's sad and amazing thing about the son, though, is that he felt deprived by his father because the father had never given anything, right? No calf, no chicken, not even a goat. But what happened when the younger son left? The older son got his share because it said the father divided it amongst his kids. And the father then reaffirms that and says, "My son, you are always with me. Everything I have is yours." Everything I have is yours. It's like, I already gave it to you. Son says, "Dad, you never threw me a cow." He goes, "You already own the cows." "Dad, you never threw me a party." "The party's already yours." "Dad, you never did." "Yes, I did." It's already here. But the son, in his own arrogance, missed it. He missed that he was already being celebrated. He was already a part of it. He had distanced himself and refused to rejoin his father. So what does the dad do here? The dad goes to his older son. I love the analogy here that sometimes I don't think we talk about often. The younger son, he was waiting, right? It says he was looking. The younger son had that humility point, and the father ran through the gauntlet to get to the younger son, humiliating himself. The older son is still at home, but he distances himself. Even though he already owns everything the dad does, what does dad still do? He still goes to him. Whether he was down in the dumps and the slums and being humiliated, or right there in his own moment of arrogance, dad went both ways. He went to see both sons. Now, culturally as well, if you were throwing a party for the whole village and you were celebrating something, you know what you did not do? You don't leave the party. That is embarrassing. That is humiliating. Why would he take care of this? His son is shaming him and he's going to abandon the party he's throwing to go deal with that? That's ridiculous. But he does it anyways. He humiliates himself for his younger son, and he humiliates himself for his older son. Jesus is doing something very deliberate in this story. It would have been intuitively understood by all listeners because they would have used this structure in their stories. They would have understood the social commentary happening. There's a lack of resolve in this story. In their minds, there's a piece missing. And what's missing? They don't know what the older son did, right? It doesn't finish what the older son did. The story just kind of ends there. The first story, the son is far off, but at the end of the story, he's found. In the second part, the son is far off because he's distanced himself, but what does he do? We don't know. But I think Jesus leaves it there on purpose because who's he telling the story to? He's telling it to the Pharisees. Who do you think the Pharisees are identifying with in this story? They're probably looking at that older son and going, oops. Hopefully they're saying oops. But Jesus poses this question to the Pharisees after telling them about the lost sheep, the lost coin, and the lost son. Clearly, in their minds, they are the older son. They knew the laws. They're walking with God, right? They know the scriptures. They know the testimonies. They know the rules. They know what they're supposed to do. And how dare Jesus humiliate himself and go be with these other people? How dare he? He should be there for them. They are the older sons in here. They're the ones who stayed around. They tried to obey. They served God like slaves. But in their hearts, they were so far off. They didn't want to come to the party and celebrate the return of the people being healed. To celebrate the ones who had squandered their living in foreign lands and then came to Christ. They didn't want them to be near the Father. Jesus is saying the younger son understands and accepts where he was, how far off he was, and he's been found. He admits that he was lost. The father comes out and outrageously welcomes him back into the home. The older son, far off too. So far off, but so proud of where he is. So proud that he can't see the celebration happening, and he doesn't want the celebration to happen for other people. He's proud because he knows he's really not that bad of a guy. He's done everything he's told. He's mad at the dad, and he refuses to come in. The father comes out to him just as much as he comes out to the younger son. He talks about rejoicing and asks him to come in. Does the son come in? We don't know. But I think the question for us is, do we come in? When I started this series a few weeks ago, I talked about how God was convicting me in ways that I was a Pharisee. So when I look at this story, I see the younger son, and I see the hurt he's gone through, and I see the pain and God running to him. But I also need to understand, in all of my pride, in all the ways that I fall short, do I let God come to me and do those things? Do I still let him run to me? Do I let him kiss me? Do I let him clothe me, elevate me, and celebrate me? And do I allow myself to do that for everybody? I can't be so far off that I miss the people that need Jesus just as much as I do. The older son is far off. Sometimes we can be so far off, but we think we're so right. The challenge for us is to realize that, in all reality, none of us are right. We can all do better. We can all humble ourselves in different ways. There are all things we have to deal with, but I love that we see this dad. We see this image of God who will humiliate himself to show you how much he loves you. He will run the gauntlet for you. No matter how far off you are in life, no matter where you've done, he will run the gauntlet for you and walk with you as you're going through the gauntlet back. And he'll let everybody see it. He'll let everyone see what he's done for you. Do we come into the party as well? Do we humble ourselves and let God do those things for us? Do we make sure that we see lost people coming to know him the way that God wants to see those lost people coming to know him? I think a key thing for me as I saw this was, don't berate people, celebrate people. Don't berate people, celebrate people. I'd like to invite the worship team up as we come to a close this morning. I think that the whole point of this story is that the Father loves us. He loves his kids so much, nothing can stop it. And I encourage you guys, read through this story and focus on those things that we talked about the Father today, and then relate that back into your life. Where do you need to see God running to you? Or when you come to God, do you look up and see God running to you? One of my favorite Christian artists is Toby Mac. I've been listening to him since before I was younger than all you guys up front here, back when he was with DC Talk. Represent. Toby Mac, he lost his son a number of years ago, and he wrote this incredible song about his son Truett. And he talks openly about his son Truett. If you've ever listened to his Toby Mac's albums, his son usually has a track on there at some point, whether singing with them or in his later CDs, he actually got some of his own songs. But Truett had done his first show, I believe. And it wasn't too far after he did his first show that Toby Mac actually talks about it. Truett got into some form of substance abuse and it killed him. And he uses this story in his song when he's singing about, the song is called 21 Years. If you're ready to be an emotional wreck, listen to that song. But he talks about one part of the song about his son getting to see God in heaven. And he says, did he see you from a long way off, running to you with a father's love? And I love that symbol because even though his son may have passed away in a horrible tragedy and maybe not on the path that his dad wanted him to be on, in that moment, Toby Mack knew, when my son is standing before God and walking, what is God gonna do when he sees my son? He's running to him. Are you gonna let God run to you today, no matter where you are, no matter what you've been? Let him run to you and let him throw you that party. Understand, you are valuable. Do you matter to God? More than you know. Does everyone else out there matter to God? More than we know. Let's be a part of that story. Let's celebrate people. Let's invite people to love that Father and see that Father who, as soon as they look, they can see him running to them. Amen. Would you stand with me? God, I thank you so much for today. God, I thank you that you run to us. I thank you that in the midst of everything we can do that's humiliating and embarrassing, you'll humiliate yourself to show us how much we matter, how much you love us, how much you care. God, and I ask that we hold on to that, God. We understand that we are so valuable in your eyes. And God, I pray that you allow us to show other people how valuable they are to your eyes as well. So God, we thank you for who you are and what you do. And God, I thank you that you run to us. And I ask that we run to you. We thank you, love you. And everybody said, amen.